Hello, and welcome to the Permission to Breathe podcast, a transformative space dedicated to providing a sanctuary where you can inhale deeply and exhale freely, embracing your grief journey unapologetically. I am your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, here with you every Monday to offer comfort, guidance, and hope. Together we'll navigate this path, finding moments to pause, reflect, and breathe. Let's begin this journey side by side. Are you grieving and feel like you're struggling alone? You don't have to walk this path by yourself. Book a virtual session with Dr. Tammy Isaac at Breathe Grief Counseling Center. Visit us online at www.breathegriefcounselingcenter.com. Dr. Isaac will help you put your emotions into words. She'll help you reduce the feeling of isolation. She'll help you understand that everyone grieves differently, and also help you prevent unhealthy coping mechanisms. Take control of your life with world-class counseling sessions today with Dr. Tammy Isaac. Hello, and welcome to A Seat at the Table, Stories of Mother Grief, a special Mother's Day mini-series from the Permission to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tammy Isaac, and this series was created to hold space for every story that doesn't always fit into the greeting cards and flower arrangements of this season. Because for many, Mother's Day brings not only celebration, but sorrow. And today we explore kind of sorrow that's hard to explain, but deeply felt. This episode is for the daughters and sons who are grieving a mother who is still alive, but no longer the same. Maybe it was an accident, a diagnosis, a slow unraveling that happened quietly over time. You still see her face, hear her voice maybe, but the connection has changed. The relationship has shifted. The mother you once knew, the one who nurtured you, protected, guided you, is now someone else. This is called ambiguous grief. It's a loss without death, a mourning without a funeral, a grief that goes largely unseen because from the outside, nothing looks broken. But on the inside, you know something precious has changed. Today, we'll hear the story of Likeythia Blackmon, who courageously shares her story of life after her mother's fatal accident. An accident that didn't take her mother's life, but forever changed their presence, their bond, and the way Likeythia had to learn to love through a new kind of pain. In her words, we'll hear not only the grief of what was lost, but the resilience required to keep showing up for someone who cannot show up the same way in return. This episode is a sacred invitation to name the grief that lingers in the in-between, to acknowledge the invisible losses, and also to remember, even if the world doesn't understand your sorrow, you still have a seat at the table. So let's take a deep breath. And let's listen now as Likeythia opens her heart and shares her story with us.
Prior to May 2nd, 2020, my mom was this vibrant, full of life, kind of not necessarily a diva, but diva without the negative parts. And she was just the mom, a great example, right? She was a woman of God. She still is a woman of God. She was a minister of the gospel. My mom did jazzercise 5 to 7 times a week. My mom was very athletic, very much into her health, fashion, loved God, loved her family, oh, so very much. And we would do so many things together as the kids were in school, younger Mom was always there supporting in whichever way she could, even if it was by afar. Maybe she may have been out of town, but she always made sure her grandkids had what they needed. She made them Easter baskets well into high school, I believe. And she was that grandmother who baked cakes for her grandchildren's friends. She was just all around mom, awesome, and she still is. The accident, as I refer to, May 2nd, 2020, my parents were in a terrible motorcycle accident, and by the grace of God, they are both still here with some bumps and some bruises and a journey ahead, but they're still here. As a result of the accident, my mom is what you would kind of call total assist. She no longer walks. She is tube fed, but I'm telling you, the life is still there. The quickness, if you will, is still there. But obviously, some things changed, and our relationship changed that day, not knowing what was going to be ahead. But it's just different. I'd never seen my mom in the hospital, and it is the honest to God truth. The only time I know for a fact she was in the hospital prior to this accident is when she gave birth to me. We, would visit people in the hospital. My mom was the person people would call, and she would go pray and this. But to be in the hospital, never. So to see her from never having been in the hospital to being in the hospital or some type of facility for 3 years before she came home was a lot. Still is a lot. Now she's home, and she is still mom, right? She's still MJ, right? But a lot of things have changed, and I had to come to grips with that. As a matter of fact, I remember you, Dr. Isaac, sharing with me that it's okay to grieve, or it was okay to grieve the person my mom once was in certain facets. That was very freeing for me, because I remember saying the whole time I was going through, seeing after my parents in the hospital, and my stepfather was and is amazing throughout all of it, even being hurt himself. But I would always say, I'm just not going to let people tell me how to feel, because in all honesty, I didn't know how to feel. My world seemed as if it was flipped upside down. I have my entire life, and then I have my life from May 2nd, 2020, and I know a lot of us relate that to COVID, but for me, it was way more than that, and just going through that amid COVID, only by the grace of God, I'm here. So when I talk about how our relationship have changed, we no longer, ride around hitting up Ross. We no longer, travel out of town. Actually, my son and his wife are here, who, I would do a lot of traveling. No longer do those things. It's more now care and still hanging out at the house. But it's different. It's different in a lot of ways. But I'm still grateful for who she is. But I definitely grieve the loss. Mom was so full of life. She is, but she was very athletic, very into movement, and I think I had to deal with the most the fact that she can no longer walk, and she's in a wheelchair, but she's still and I keep reminding myself, she's still MJ Wright. But just the things I know that she loved to do, and I thank God for my stepfather, because he continues to work so very hard to be sure that her life is fulfilled, and that is such a blessing. And I just thank God for that. So, do I grieve and miss certain facets of her life and our life. Yes. But am I grateful that she's still here? Most definitely. And I give all praise and honor to God. But there are just some things about MJ Wright I miss. Um, but I'm so very grateful that she's still here with us. Such a blessing. My mom's accident, wow, it affected me emotionally. It affected me spiritually. Um, I can remember so many days just being overcome, right, with grief and hurt, and my heart just feeling like it was just going to literally pump out of my chest. I remember dreading daylight. The later it would get in the day, the better I felt, because I felt as though the world would just slow down for a minute. There would be no questions to answer. There would be no one to call. There would be no one to even discuss my feelings or how I felt, for people that were checking in, which was such a blessing. Spiritually, I just, oh my goodness, I prayed and I prayed and I just talked to God. I was blessed to have people in my life um, who just upheld me on this journey, as far as praying with me, talking to me, obviously praying for me, just being such support in so many ways. Because remember, this was at the beginning of COVID, and from the moment Mom was in the hospital, there was such restrictions on visitation, and then there was kind of fear, because obviously you don't want to take anything in to make her sick. And I remember before she was moved to her very first long-term care facility, she was in the hospital, and I would just call over and over and just check in. And it was both of them. So I would call, hang up, Mom call right back, and check on my stepfather. And it was, I don't even know that I really have the words. I don't even know that I've really just truly, I guess, absorbed all that happened. And so emotionally, there were days where there was a roller coaster. Matter of fact, there are days that are still a roller coaster for me, because I'm my mom's only child. Even in her phone, she has me as my child. uh, we had just a love bond, and especially more in my adult years, and the kids. And our last conversation was about planning a baby shower for my oldest grandson, who was not yet born, obviously. And then after that, we were on a prayer call together, because my cousin's mom had a stroke and was in the hospital, and the family was on a prayer call. And those were my last conversations with my mom for over a year and a half, that because she was what you call minimally conscious. She wasn't really awake, and it was COVID, so it was visiting through the window at certain long-term facilities. The first one, it was an hour a day, and I just remember my own daughter being 8 months pregnant, and it was COVID, and it was hot, and only I could go in, and she would sit outside and wait for me to come down, because I would just, some days I was just such an emotional, I don't want to say wreck, but I was just on a roller coaster. I was cycling through so many feelings, and still, never, ever, ever angry at God. Not angry at the person who hit them. I was just hurt. And I think that I just needed time, and I still need time. But by the grace of God, I feel better. I trust God. I trust Him. I know that He will never fail us. I know that He didn't bring us this far to leave us. I definitely know that if it was her time, they both would be out of here. They had to be life flighted. It was horrible accident, but He spared their lives. He spared her life, and she still have a story to tell. She still has many sermons to preach. And so I remember that even on days like right now, well, this is incredibly not difficult, but it's emotional because I haven't just really sat down to tell what has happened as a story, if you will. But I'm grateful to God, and I'm grateful, and I just think about it. I'm my mom's only child, but then just if I had to look at it as a person, I just think about the things that she loved to do that she can no longer do. And it probably bothers me more than bothers her because my mom has crazy faith. But it still does. I won't lie. There's still some struggles with emotions. There's still some struggles because I know the pre-MJ right? And I thank God for the MJ right now. But I grieve those things for her because she was just one of a kind. And so every day is a different journey. But I thank God because He's bringing us both all through it, and I'm very, very grateful. Stepping into a caregiver or support role for mom was very hard at first. I remember when mom was in the hospital, they both were. It's kind of hard to talk about this without my stepfather because they literally were in this together, which is something I'm sure they never dreamed would happen, right? That something would happen to both of them at the same time. But I just felt like I was going through her life, right? Like I needed to go to the house to get some stuff. I needed to, obviously take care of business side of things and I hated it. I absolutely hated it because I felt, like I was just in their business, and not in a bad way, but it was just like, it was just something I didn't want to do. It hurt, and it was just all about me and my feelings, nothing negative. I just felt like, I don't want to go through my mom's things, right? I don't want to do this or do that. I think it just made everything so real, and I was grappling with it.
Today's episode is sponsored by Let the Church Grieve by Dr. Tammy Isaac, a compelling book that explores the often overlooked subject of grief within spiritual communities. Dr. Isaac combines personal antidotes with theological insights, providing a compassionate framework for understanding and addressing grief collectively. This book emphasizes the need for spiritual leaders to create safe spaces for mourning and guides congregations through the grieving process with faith and empathy. It's a must-read for anyone looking to support those experiencing grief within their spiritual communities. Grab your copy of Let the Church Grieve at www.drtammyisaac.com today and begin the journey towards healing and growth. Now back to our show.
I just miss those times, where she would just be grandmother to them in her own way, even as adults. She loved them, and she would just, there was nothing short. Now, she wasn't going to do any spoiling in the way that was detrimental, but she was going to lavish them with the love. And uh, as I stated earlier, my mom baked cakes for the kiddos, for my children that I kept when they were younger and clear up through adults. And there was a price to pay. When she baked a cake at their house, my stepfather always took a slice, so you always got your cake, but the payment was he got a slice. So not only not only for my kids, but even their friends, and mom would, she still baked the cakes. And it was just fun holidays. I absolutely hate when people throw away food. So that's one of the things I hate about holidays. So we would kind of come together, and mom would just have all this stuff. We'd go by and we would pick up our dinner from their house. And that's the kind of mom she was and is. And I miss those things. We had a Christmas tradition. We went to Denny's every Christmas morning, and then we would, divide afterwards and kind of go do things. And sometimes we would go back to the house and watch movies or whatever we were going to do. But mom was big on traditions. She was big on family. She is making memories and being together. And those are the things I miss. And I currently don't do a good job at keeping up with the things that she used to do, but I do try. And so I miss all those things. Celebrating Mother's Day for me has kind of changed in multiple ways. We had kind of already stopped like the whole restaurant thing because lines are long. We go to church. But we would still make a point to share and celebrate each other. And I have tried to not let my feelings show on my face or in my actions, but my daughter tells me all the time that I go somewhere. Like, she's like, you've gone somewhere. So I try to be very careful because I have very thoughtful and loving children. And I never want to, I guess, impede on the fact that they would like to celebrate their mother. So, and I appreciate everything they do. But there's just a piece of me that is still stuck, because, again, I'm very grateful. And I know that God knows this, but I think it just makes me feel better to say it. I'm very grateful because my mom is still alive. My mom is still here. My mom can have a conversation, and all these things. But I do grieve some of the things or the way that she used to be, the way that things were. I'm not hopeless in these things, but I do miss them. And on Mother's Day, I try not to dwell, but I don't even want to say that it's inevitable, but it's there. The emotions are there, the thoughts, but I try to then be cognizant and more aware and just remind myself how blessed we are. And it's kind of gone from getting her. My mom and I both love red lipstick. Oh my goodness, we love red lipstick. So I know my daughter had gotten her a couple of different kinds. I think mom would do like the Ruby Woo, and I know my daughter had gotten her like some Sephora Stain one time. And we would get her just different things, shoes or clothes. And she still gets those things. But now, now instead of heels or some fancy shoe my daughter finds, we're getting her Skechers that have the shoehorn on the back to get that foot in the shoe. So being on this journey with my mom, it's taught me so much. It's matured me so much. And I've always been a person. Like, I love hard, right? If I love you, I love you. You know it, and everybody else knows it. Despite, I love hard. But I think that I have even a deeper love for my mom, for family, for time. Because there's no way, like, I think about it and I know that my parents always prepared for, if something happened. I am 100% sure they never dreamed, right, that something would happen to both of them at the same time. And I look at my stepfather, and I am telling you, he loves his wife. My stepfather is amazing. And I know that, there are millions, right, of married people in this world. But he loves his wife. I see it. It is so genuine, and it's such a blessing. It's such a beautiful thing to see. But it's also, it helps me to see it. It helps me to know, we live in a world where people can do some things to really blow your mind, right? You never think. And I'm so grateful, that if he has changed since the accident, I think he loves her more. And I love that. And we try to do little things, and I, just chat or come out for birthdays, and, he's rolling, he's loading mom up, and he's bringing her. And it just shows that there is real love, and that is amazing. And I know that there are lots of sacrifices that have to be made just to be sure that mom has what she needs. And I give him, I give God all the glory and honor for giving us the strength, giving my stepfather the strength to be to her what he is. And she gonna call his name. My parents are Jackie and Janice. And she's gonna call Jackie. She loves him. He loves her. It's just amazing to see, to experience. And while I know that there's sacrifices all the way around, at the end of the day, it just feels like love. And, sometimes by the time I pull up in the driveway, there are just these tears. I love my mom. I miss my mom. But I'm grateful for her. All that wrapped up into one. And so it just makes you want to be better. And when I say that, be more intentional, be more present, and to lavish those you love, with your encouragement, with your presence, with your time. Gifts and all those things are important, but I'm sure, if my mom had a choice, she would love to be able to remember to do the things she did for us as far as loving us and showing us. But because she did those things, right, we're able to carry that legacy on. Um, and that's a blessing. And so, even as I myself, have gone, my children, as I said, are adults, adults. um, in July, I will literally be the parent of three 30 somethings. Or so that's something in and of itself. And I know, Mom, we were just really, because my daughter, who's the baby's turning 30, and we would just really be, celebrating her down. But it's just, we still can carry on the things that Mom did. We still have movie nights and things like that. So for me, naturally, I evolve as a mom because I'm not just a mom, but I'm a grandmother now, which is so amazing. Um, but I have to be careful because I will check out in a way, not totally, but as my daughter say, you just go somewhere. So I be careful not to go anywhere. I try to work really hard to be present with my children, no matter what it is, because every time we do something, no matter what it is, you know, we have always done or mostly done these things together. And for the past couple of months, it's been a little tough with tragedy that has struck our family. However, we're still there. It's like all this time, Mom just built up all this love and all these memories for us to hang on to because we never know. You never know. So I thank God for that, and I want to be that. So as I, matriculate this role, um, mom, grandmother, I think I just have to be careful to be present. And I think I've done a better job than I had done previously, but there are times where I just go deep in thought. Um, but I've learned to be cognizant. I've learned just how precious life and time really is, And I've also learned that it is okay, as you told me, uh, to grieve. Because I don't think that I ever would have put it into those words. And I'm the better for it. I think it it shows, and I'm grateful, and I just thank God for the opportunity, I guess, to grieve, but grieve through it all. I hope that makes sense. And as I think about it, I believe that it's made me a better mother, a prepared grandmother, a friend, just in every role, And so I'm grateful, and I thank God because He blessed me with a one of a kind mom, and I love her dearly.
Likeythia, thank you so much for trusting us today with your story, for putting words to the ache so many carry silently, for naming the grief of losing someone who still breathes but no longer connects the way they once did. To the listeners who resonates with this, maybe you're also caring for a parent, a partner, or someone you love deeply, someone whose body remains but whose personality, memory, or presence has been altered by trauma, illness, or age. I want you to know that what you're feeling is real. This grief you carry, it's not imaginary, it's not selfish, and you're not weak for feeling exhausted or heartbroken or unsure how to keep loving in the midst of so much change. This is what we call ambiguous grief, a grief without clear resolution. There's no clean line between what was and what is. There's no funeral to mark the shift, just moments, quiet, ongoing moments where the absence is loud, even though the person is still physically there. It's one thing to grieve what was, and it's another thing entirely to keep showing up for someone who doesn't or can't show up for you the same way. Maybe you were once the daughter who could call your mom for advice. Now you're helping her get dressed. Maybe she once remembered everything about you. Now she barely remembers your name. That kind of grief doesn't go away. It changes form. It lives in the spaces between memory and reality. It's sort of layered with love, responsibility, resentment, longing, and even guilt. And yet there is something holy or sacred about loving in the in-between. There is something sacred about continuing to care when the connection feels fractured. There is a deep spiritual strength in honoring someone not for who they are now, but for who they've always been within your heart. And in moments like these, when your heart is tired and your spirit feels stretched thin, what I want you to remember is this: God sees the whole story, okay? Not just the part others notice, not just the caregiving, not just the surface smiles, but the tears that you cry on the drive home, the ache that you feel when Mother's Day roll around and you wonder if she even knows who you are, the mourning of conversations you'll never have again. God sees all of that and holds you in it. Psalms 56:8 says, "You have kept count of my tossings, but put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book?" Understand that nothing is wasted, not your grief, not your love, not your fatigue. You're not invisible, you're not failing. You're navigating something that is profoundly complex with compassion, and that in itself is love. Let's take a moment to talk a little bit more about this word, ambiguous grief. It may sound clinical or abstract, but for many people, it's not. It's the most accurate way actually to describe a wound that hasn't closed because it never really had the chance to. Ambiguous grief is the mourning that happens when you lose something psychologically, emotionally, or relationally, but not physically. It's the grief of someone still breathing, but distance, change, unreachable. It's a kind of grief that doesn't come with a service or a sympathy card, but it sits heavy within your soul every single day. And here's the truth that someone may need to hear today. It's okay to grieve this. It's okay to cry over someone who's still here, and it's okay to be angry, confused, exhausted, and even numb. You're not doing grief wrong, and you're not doing faith wrong. Sometimes we think we have to put on a brave face to honor people that we love, or worse, we think we have to suppress our sadness to be spiritually strong. But let me say this clearly: God is not mad at you for your sorrow. God is not threatened by your tears. He doesn't flinch when you say this hurts. He doesn't pull away when you whisper, "I miss her." In fact, scripture says he draws closer to the brokenhearted. Not when we fix our faces, not when we force a smile, but in our brokenness. You may feel torn because you're grateful she survived the accident, and yet you still feel like you lost something precious. That tension is real, and you're allowed to hold both. You can be grateful and still grieve. You can thank God for what remains and still mourn what's gone. That doesn't make you faithless. That makes you human. And I think we learned that by listening to Likeythia's story. Now, one of the biggest lies grief tells to us is that we must choose joy over sorrow. But the truth is, the heart is big enough to hold both. So if you felt ashamed of your feelings, if you tried to tuck them away because at least she's still here, you're telling yourself, I want to invite you to stop hiding and let the tears fall, let the truth rise, and let your grief begin to breathe, because grief needs air, not to destroy you, but to cleanse you, to release the pressure you've been carrying, to remind you that God can handle your honesty and still call you beloved. You're not being ungrateful for feeling sad. You're not weak for being weary. You're not dishonoring your mother by missing who she used to be. You're telling the truth, and that truth matters here. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of A Seat at the Table, Stories of Mother Grief, a special Mother's Day mini-series from the Permission to Breathe podcast. And thank you to Likeythia Blackmon for courageously sharing her heart, her mother's story, and what it means to grieve someone who is still alive but forever changed. If you are walking through ambiguous grief, I want you to know that you are seen. You are allowed to grieve what was, and your sorrow does not diminish your faith, your strength, or your love. God is not asking you to hide your heartbreak. He's asking you to bring it to him, to let it breathe, to trust that even in the shifting, he remains steady. You can be grateful for what you still have and still mourn what you've lost. You are allowed to miss the version of your loved one that no longer exists. And you don't have to carry that grief in silence. At this table, we make room for the in-between. We honor what the world often overlooks, and we speak aloud what so many feel but rarely say. In our next episode, we'll hear from a woman who lost her mother as an adult, a story of love, loss, memory, and what it means to navigate life without the one who once guided you through it. We'll talk about adult orphanhood, legacy, and the unexpected ways grief reshapes us. Until then, remember to breathe gently, honor your story, and remember, there is always a seat at this table for you. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Permission to Breathe podcast. I hope today created space for you to breathe and find peace on your journey. I invite you to join me again next Monday for another episode as we continue to navigate this path together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share the podcast. Until next time, take care and keep breathing unapologetically.